Welcome to Innovating with Scott Amyx. I'm your host, Scott, and today I'm joined by Eyal Feldman, who is a co-founder and CEO at Stampli.
Hi, Scott. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
All right, great. So prior to Stampli, you worked at Ness and saw many implementation in terms of government administration moving to more paperless. So I'm curious to understand how that experience helped kind of make way to the creation of what it is today, Stampli.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my previous career, I dealt a lot with ERPs and with systems that were supposed to help you manage documents better and all the workflows around these documents. And one of the things that I've learned is that, you know, because of the way the technology was structured, you either would solve a problem of a process with an ERP or something which is very database centric, or you would look at the document and kind of take care of it aside, you know, not as part of the process. And when I've seen a lot of projects in that aspect, what happens is that you get to this window ceiling of how much efficiency you can bring into the process if you're leaving the document not as part of it. Because, you know, people, if it's not easily accessible for them, they're not going to go through the hassle of finding that document. So what we've done, we use all these document management solution technologies in order to push the right document or the right content to the user as part of the process that they already had figured out in one or a system or another. And what we've seen is that the efficiency and the ability to improve the process is unbelievable when you do it this way, you know, when you're really thinking about the two together and about the process itself and not thinking systems. So I've been working with a lot of different customers on a lot of different problems, and any process has documents related to that. And the approach of connecting that document to the process, to the right person, at the right time, at the right place, just made such a world of a difference that I've realized that it's just not done well enough and enough, you know, when thinking about business processes. And this is where it was all born. And I was looking for a specific domain, a specific area where I can apply that logic, but build it really around a specific process. Just because selling infrastructure, also from my experience back then, is much harder. The concept of an infrastructure, showing you as a customer what you may be doing with all this technology, instead of taking a certain domain, packaging it really, really well, and bringing you a solution that just resonates because it makes so much more sense. So this is actually how it started, by combining structured and unstructured data together into one process, by delivering the user and thinking about the user and the persona of the user, delivering them what they need to see and what they need to do when they need it. And not just say, if you need that, go somewhere and look for it, you know, because then it doesn't matter if it's a library or an archive room or a digital archive system, which is still isolated. The idea is to connect the two.
Yeah, great point. And I was still very much thinking about what you say, which is ERPs are supposed to help us. And
right.
Of course, the challenge with the previous non-cloud based ERP was that in order for it to be useful, you have to enter data. And so there's a lot of manual entry. And of course, like you said, it was really focused on workflow for structured types of data. But when you had unstructured things that were, you know, PDFs or images, whatnot, it was just dumped into some archive or some place, and it was up to the individuals to have to sort it out and sort through. So if you think about loan documentation, all the kind of compliance and, you know, disclosure that has to be in place, it's just a bunch of PDFs and images that's out there, but frankly, it's not really well integrated so that it's seamless.
Right.
And so let's talk about what Stampli does and why focus on accounts payable versus, let's say, accounts receivable.
So what Stampli does is that so the topic is accounts payable. And accounts payable is, you know, when an organization receives an invoice and everything they need to do in order to get that invoice paid. And actually, it's a really interesting story of what account payable is. And I've learned through the time with Stampli how different what AP really is and what people think AP is. Because what what AP is, in fact, it's this small department inside accounting that got ownership into a process that they have very little to do with that process. So the process is the procure to pay process, which is a sophisticated process that every company has. And in order to put that thing under control, which has a lot of spend, under that process, so they had to take a department which is used to control, the controller is the manager of that department, and to ask them to make sure that this process is fully under control. So what they do is they're not paying the invoices. What they're doing is that they're verifying that this invoice is legit, that this invoice is actually what we ordered, and these were the terms we agreed on, and this is how much we wanted to order. And then they need to verify that someone actually received that, and they're happy with what they received. And then they need to take that and see how they want to allocate this cost, into the right business department in order to analyze their business correctly. And after they've done all these things, they're ready to pay the invoice, which is really the last step. So when you come to think about it, it's a process of a small department of people that need to collaborate with so many people inside the organization and outside the organization in order to just get their job done. They're not dependent on themselves. They're dependent on so many other people to get all this feedback and answers and details and data in order to complete their job. So as a subject, I find it fascinating because of the collaboration aspect, because I think when it comes to document and collaboration, it starts to be really, really interesting. And traditionally, everybody looked at that process just from the data entry viewpoint, just in a very narrow way, and kind of ignored everything that happens around that process in order to facilitate that. And what we've done is that we took the invoice and we turned the invoice into a communication tool that allowed this small department of people to now communicate with everybody where they need the inputs that they need to get. So I think it's just an amazing opportunity in terms of the solution. It's an amazing opportunity in terms of size. It's a problem that every company has. You can segment based on small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and enterprises, but every company has that problem. And what makes it even more exciting is that at the end, this is the process that facilitates movement of all the money that goes through B2B, which is a lot of money. So there are a lot of opportunities on that end as well. So this is why AP, but when I thought about the company I want to start, I was actually looking at almost any process out there and how to build it the way I just explained would make the most impact and it will be the largest opportunity. So that's how I came to accounts payable.
Yeah, I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense, because part of the reason I mentioned accounts receivable is it's something that directly impacts the bottom line of an organization, and it's an inflow versus outflow. But when you think about the coordination, the orchestration, the multidisciplinary, multifunctional, departmental handoffs, approvals, reviews, and audits, and sign-offs, it is actually, AP is actually very interesting. It really is, and it's a validation point, because if they don't do it right, you could be potentially outflowing money that is not merited, or it could be inaccurate, and that could have tremendous amount of implication, financial implication. And as well as that process aids in the kind of entire procurement and the business units that are making those buying decisions to make sure that it's prudent, that they're thinking through versus just randomly placing orders and hoping that somebody's going to pay the bill, so to speak. So I think that handoff is super critical. So it's a kind of a mini ERP within an ERP. How is Stampli positioned differently from other vis-a-vis competitors directly in your space?
So it's because it's a problem that exists forever, and it had to find solution. People had to find solutions. So traditionally, what was done is that they said, okay, that's a process that involves all these people. Let's see what kind of tools we can use in order to solve that. And the thing that was out there was kind of BPM tools and workflow tools. Now, BPM tools and workflow tools, they're great tools, but for certain processes which are more predictable, which means there is some logic that you can apply to who needs to look at it first, who needs to look at it second, and who third, and how I'm going to build that logic. The problem with AP is that it's not that nature, which means the beginning is already, a mystery. Where the invoice lands? Is it in AP? Is it in the business user that has this relationship with the vendor? So the initiation point is already not clear. And then the question of who needs to be involved is also not clear. It depends if you have discrepancies, you don't have discrepancies. There are so many different things that needs to be figured out. And it's not a sequential process. It's something that requires a lot of involvement of different people along the way. I'll give you an example. If there is a VP of marketing, so AP knows that marketing, it's a marketing invoice. Marketing should approve that. So they send it to the VP of marketing. Now the VP of marketing has 60 people in their team, and they don't know exactly if this invoice is right, legit, did we receive that service, didn't we receive that? So they need to go and figure it out with other people inside their department. So the question is, am I finishing my process by asking them to approve that? Or am I allowing them now to run a whole process of communicating with their peers and people in their team in order to figure out that invoice or how this invoice should be coded to which department? So the more I'm giving them the tools, the less I'm forcing them to go and do it outside the system. And when you start to do things outside the system, this is where things starts to break. So by us giving the tool to do everything until the last mile through our system, everything around that invoice, we're making sure that it doesn't break, and we're giving everybody the transparency they need in order to really know what's going on right now.
Yeah, it's super interesting because unlike predetermined sets of business rules and logic, the who and the what and the interactions and the flow, it's really very ad hoc, and it's going to be very specific to that invoice, and it's going to change. So there isn't necessarily like predictable regular pattern that you can follow. So the ability to be able to basically hand it off to any business department, to any actor within that organization, is very intriguing from a rights and permissioning as well as just kind of the workflow and approval process. So
Right.
that fluidity and the direction which way it can go, it takes a myriad of kind of manifestations, so to speak.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where are you guys positioned in terms of the marketplace, and how are you guys coming in terms of investing into the product roadmap so that you can have even more distinctive comparative differences?
So to complete also your previous question, when we look at what differentiates us, and this is also where we're going. So our target market is the mid-market and above. And what we've seen is that, essentially companies in the mid-market, unlike the huge enterprises that didn't have a choice before, they wouldn't go through a system that now will require 3 months of implementation. And again, let's bring the CEO to give their commitment that this is, we need that to be successful, and let's hold everything back and make that happen. They want something that can work really quickly and bring the value that they need. So what differentiates us really is, first of all, our approach to the whole process by looking at the process as a collaboration process, by giving the tool to communicate around the invoice with everybody that needs to communicate, if it's the stakeholders inside my company, if it's the vendors from outside the company. The second thing that we're doing is that we're incorporating machine learning and AI to learn patterns. You mentioned patterns. So we're learning the patterns from the way you use the system, and we're suggesting them to you. We have Billy the Bot. That's Billy the Bot. And Billy the Bot is our machine learning component. It's a collection of a lot of algorithms. And essentially what Billy does, it looks everywhere in the system, and every time it recognizes a pattern, it will suggest that pattern if it's confident enough that that's going to be something you're going to need to use again. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, and I think really important for our target market, is the no implementation. So we are able to go live with the customer within hours, where any of our competitors would take weeks, if not months, to get to the same point. And again, it's mainly because we are not asking you questions that we can figure out the answers ourselves. That's something that we put for ourselves as a lighthouse. I mean, if I can, by connecting to your ERP, learn something about how you are working, I will do that, and I will not ask you how you're working. And in this way, I'm shortening the time to implement because I'm learning it by myself instead of just asking you. So that's the third thing. And our target market, because of that, and where we are really strong, is this mid-market that are now used to get solutions which are of much higher level of user experience and value at a lower cost and at a much lower time to implement, without all that these bells and whistles of CEO commitment and let's make it work. Just let's make it work because it's a good solution.
Terrific. So we only have about 30 seconds left. Can you share, when you think about not just your current company, but your career, some of the maybe product failures that you've experienced and key lessons learned that you can share with others?
So, failures, one thing I learned about failures is that they're necessary. There is nothing that can educate you better than your failures. It's hard to learn from others people's failures. It's easier to learn from your own because it kind of gets part of your physical body. When you're getting closer to make a similar mistake, it shouts. You have all the red lights. So I think you need to embrace failures, and it's part of what you're doing. You shouldn't look at it as a failure. You should look at it as an opportunity. An opportunity to learn, and I'm really trying to do that a lot, and I'm encouraging people to fail in order to learn. I'm also encouraging them to really take the lesson from what happened in order to make sure at least it was a valuable lesson, because there is always a price to failing, and you want to make that price make sense. So you have to really incorporate what you learn from that. So, it's really about how you're dealing with the failure. It's not about failing. I can give you a huge list of failures. I think what's special is how you're dealing with it, how you're coping with it, and what you're doing with it next. And that's something that I think that it's just part of what we do every day.
Right. That's a great point, and I think that is so valuable, not just from an organizational culture, but even regional culture. And many cultures actually kind of struggle with that. And that notion of failure as something personal, when in fact it needs to be something perceived as a scientific experimentation where we learn and reiterate and refine. So
Yeah.
with that, I've been joined by Eyal Feldman, who is the CEO of Stampli. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.